How's it going, everybody? My name is Absoulem, and this past week for the zombies community has been, let's say, eventful. I've seen a lot of heated debates and feedback from the community of all different types over the new map, The Tomb. It's either the best map ever or the worst thing Treyarch's ever created, but those people probably just haven't played Vanguard. But either way, the community is in a tizzy over this new map. Now, I didn't want to give a gut reaction to this map, so I gave it a few days, and now that it's been about a week or so, I've had enough time to formulate my own opinions and thoughts, so I wanted to offer my own insights on the map, but really go beyond that and go into a deeper dive into the state of the game as a whole and look at the community's feedback and just go through every element that this map has to offer. That way I can give an all-encompassing review for this map. Maybe you're somebody who hasn't played it yet, or maybe your friend told you they hated it and you haven't had a chance to experience it for yourself, or maybe you just wanted to kill some time and you clicked on this video. Well, either way, welcome to my complete breakdown of the new map, The Tomb. Before we dive into the depths of the tomb and cast our own judgment, I think it's really important that we take a step back and fully understand the state of Black Ops 6 and what has led up to this map's release, because the road that we've been on since launch plays a big part collectively for all of us on how we've received this map. So before I approach a review for this map, I think it's important that we understand why this map specifically has divided the community more than before. Because for this map, there was a lot of pressure for it to be good, which led to higher tensions when the map released. So let's take ourselves back to Black Ops 6 and see what caused the Tomb to be one of the most divisive maps. And just to be clear, for every talking point there is of course a lot more depth to these subjects, but for the sake of time, I'll just be hitting the highlights and what I think has played the biggest role in making this past launch week a enthusiastic one. What I'm about to say is going to inevitably divide the room. That's just the nature of a review. Some people are going to agree, some people will disagree, and that's totally fine. But I think if you'll give it a chance, we can all come to an understanding on what I'm trying to get across here. So, in my opinion, the state of zombies has been on a declining slope for years. And what I mean by declining is that it's getting further and further away from the expectations that we built after 10 plus years of this game. And I think that no matter who you are, we can all objectively agree that after Black Ops 4, the game changed in a major way. This is when we saw Cold War and Vanguard and Modern Warfare zombies, and I think most would dub this era the modern era of zombies. Now I bring all this up because this is why there's so much pressure for Black Ops 6 to be such a good game. And you see, it's this change that led a lot of people to not like the game. I've always looked at the zombies community as groups. You know, we have the speedrunners and the Easter eggs and the storyline people and high rounders, and then there's just the casual player base as a whole. But you see, once they made these changes, Treyarch decided to focus only on casual players, really, and they kicked everybody else to the curb. Because, you know, once they made these changes, they took away Easter eggs for a while, or they made them extremely simple. So that killed all of the Easter egg hunting. And when there's no Easter eggs, there's no speedruns, or they're extremely simple and straightforward speedruns. The high rounders didn't have as much of a challenge once they made the game a lot easier. The storyline was streamlined and really simplified, so the lore people didn't have as much to talk about, which left us with just the casual player base, which made the modern era of zombies good at two things: attracting new players and making money. And I've always looked at these lanes or groups of people as the heart and soul of the community. And once all these big changes were made for the modern era of zombies, that heart and soul died. And that's not to say that there's not people that still enjoy these games in all these different groups, but objectively speaking, a lot of these groups were affected in a negative way more than a positive. For example, the lifespan of a map used to carry the community for months, if not years. I mean, there's still to this day Easter eggs that are not solved on the older games, and people are excited to go and hunt those. Now, a new map comes out, and after a couple days, people move on, all the content's been made, the players are kind of bored, and after about a week, it's back to farming camos, and we don't even think about that map. And with all these different groups taking hit after hit after hit with each game's release, the community is red screened, and now we have nothing else to do other than hope that next year will be better. Which brings us to the point of this section of the video, that Black Ops 6 is that hope for most people that next year would be better. That's why there's so much more pressure on Black Ops 6 than any other game to be good, because this year for most of us was the last straw. You know, this was the year that was going to push people to either stop playing the game or just treat it as a casual game while they play something else. This was a big year for zombies. So that's why on October 25th of 2024, Black Ops 6's launch had to go well. And so on launch day we had Terminus and Liberty Falls, and to our surprise it actually delivered on a lot of its promises. Sure, it wasn't back to what it used to be as a mode, but we had our expectations in check. We knew it was still going to be in the modern era of zombies. It would be a lot like Cold War, where the Warzone influences and the easier Easter eggs, we understood that. but this game showed a lot of promise because it was a step in the right direction. It showed a lot of us OG fans out here that Treyarch was still capable of being Treyarch. And so even with all these drawbacks you've heard us OG fans rant about for the last few years, Black Ops 6 had a very good launch. Terminus was very popular, it was received really well as a good map, Liberty Falls was popular for challenges and grinding camos, and ultimately we were off to a good start. But even with a good launch, we still had a long ways to go. So let's fast forward to Citadel, our first DLC map, which surprisingly released only a couple months after launch. The hype was really high with the comparison of Der Eisendrache, and we were returning to a castle, and the people were very eager to see where the story was heading and just how Treyarch was going to deliver our first real expansion of maps post-launch. DLC 1 and 2 are notorious for needing to be a really strong entry into the franchise because that's what keeps the players around for the rest of the year. We expect that most of the bugs and issues are worked out at this point after launch, and essentially whenever the first DLC releases, it's quote-unquote go time. But you see, right when Citadel released, there were several topics that were slowing down Black Ops 6's momentum. First, we had a number of frustrating and game-breaking bugs that made it really tough to enjoy playing the game when you have things like the one-hit vermin. We also had various features that the community really enjoyed, like the shock charge skip on Terminus, that would just get nerfed or taken out of the game entirely. The sentiment I picked up from the community was that Treyarch wasn't listening and they were just killing fun with no rhyme or reason. So Citadel had to absolutely slap for us to look past the glaring issues. Obviously there's going to be a bit of excitement when a new map drops that shrouds the proper judgment of it, but looking past that first week of Citadel, what ended up happening was that it lost steam very quickly. I think the community was just frustrated with the blatant lack of attention from Treyarch, unless it's of course the latest store bundle, because those always work perfectly. Issues that plagued the game since launch were still happening, and the overall mood of the community had shifted quite a bit at this point. A lot of us were just sick and tired of the poor communication and out-of-touch decisions for this game. So what started off as a hopeful year for zombies was very quickly becoming yet another year of disappointment, causing the community to just drift further and further away from the game mode that we all grew up playing. But in the darkest hours of our winter season, Treyarch dropped a brand new announcement with great communication all of a sudden, so I don't know where that came from, but keep that up, Treyarch. But they announced a brand new map, a map that would hopefully not only be a solution to our concerns, but a map that also had ties to Origins. Yes, Origins, one of the ultimate all-time fan favorite maps. So, with this unexpected announcement, fans were very curious to see how or even if Treyarch could deliver on a map of this quality. This map would be known as the Tomb, and once the trailer dropped, it showed a lot of promise. The ice staff was back, and the atmosphere looked pretty cool from the trailer, and for most of us, this was a big chance to win us back over and get Black Ops 6 back on track. Now, Black Ops 6 is not a bad game by any means, but what I want to portray is that no matter how good a game is, if bugs go unpatched and communication isn't strong and poor decisions are made, it doesn't really matter how good the game is. So with the state of Black Ops 6 hanging in the balance of DLC 2, The Tomb, it needed to be a very strong entry into this franchise for Black Ops 6 to be on an uphill swing. So now that we've perused through the evolution of zombies over the past few years and we've walked down the roadmap of Black Ops 6, the table is set and I am ready to dive headfirst into my ultimate review for the new map, The Tomb. The community has a way of getting carried away with our expectations, and then when they aren't met, we get frustrated and we take it out on the devs or other members of the community. So in this short section, I wanted to run through a few of the expectations we had going into this map and expand further upon these. In a blog post released shortly before the map, Treyarch informed us that we would be getting a map that would be close quarters just like Liberty Falls. The lack of depth here from Treyarch is where I fault them, because by saying it's close quarters didn't exactly mean that it would also be a smaller map. Usually a DLC map is bigger and we expect it to have a certain quality and be more flushed out. So by saying it's like Liberty Falls and that it's close quarters, that should have been a little bit clearer. They should have said that in the way that Liberty Falls is a smaller and close quarters map, the Tomb would be very similar to the style, or something like that. And because of this, our expectations for the Tomb was that it was going to be a close quarters map, yet be a lot bigger and have more to do. However, the reality was that we got a smaller map that kind of goes along with Citadel in the same way that Liberty Falls is a companion map to Terminus. This caused a bunch of people to feel misled on release day, only really souring their first impressions of the map. See, had Treyarch expanded on this more, perhaps people would have adjusted their expectations to better suit this map. I also want to add that at the end of the Black Ops 6 life cycle, we might be looking at the Tomb as DLC 1.5, if you will, because there's a very likely chance that we might be getting more than 4 post-launch maps. The shorter breaks between releases so far is a good possibility that we might get one extra map at the end of the year in Season 6. So the takeaway for all of this is that Treyarch needs to be a little bit more specific on what the map offers without spoiling the surprises of the map, and the community, we need to be more fair in our expectations. Our next topic is that this map is linked to Origins, which already put a lot of pressure on this map. This is a big reason why I've seen people not liking the map when it came out, and I actually believe there's people out there that expected Origins 2 essentially with robots and all. I feel like this is a heightened expectation that isn't really fair for this map. We knew that it would have the ice staff from the trailer, and we knew that it would link to Origins in a loose way storyline-wise, but to assume that it was going to be an Origins format isn't really a justified criticism for this map in my opinion. So even though it would have been a massive win if Treyarch delivered yet another mud-filled hellscape, I don't agree that the tomb is bad just because it didn't have all the staffs or it wasn't our beloved gramophone wonderland of torment that we grew up with. But in reality, we got to wield an ice staff and explore an excavation site once again, and I honestly think they did a good job at making the ice staff a fun weapon to wield, and I enjoyed the music callbacks sprinkled into the map's ambiance. Later in the review, I'm going to be returning to this topic, so let's put a pin in this for now. Our next expectation was a new perk and augment, as this is a common trend for each of the new maps so far in Black Ops 6. Shortly before release, Treyarch confirmed that we were going to be getting depth perception, and they revealed all the augments associated with it. Now, I do think it was a missed opportunity to not drop Tombstone on the map The Tomb, but anyways, I digress. The community expected a new perk, and we got exactly that, and so this is one of those features that's a clear-cut addition to the map. Although I don't really think a perk hurts the image of a map in any way, I do feel like it didn't really add anything of value to this map either. So and I'm sure most of you, are just kinda meh on this addition to the map, but it doesn't really affect my overall view on whether the tomb is good or bad. Alright, so that covers the basics of what the community was to expect for this map, and now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this review and start looking at the map's overall features, the part you've been waiting on. Is the tomb good? Is it bad? Or worse, is it mid? Alright, so our first section is something that I spoke on earlier, but in this section I'll be giving my own reviews for each topic as well as breaking it down further. I want to start by expanding on the map size and the overall map design. Personally, a smaller map is completely fine to me, so I don't really fault the tomb for its map size. I mean, as a kid I grew up playing World of War maps, so these are some of my favorite memories in all of Zombies. But what I will say is that the mode has evolved since then, and Easter eggs and other gameplay features have been added, so a map does need to deliver enough space for these gameplay features so players can enjoy those aspects. So if a map is going to be smaller like the tomb, then it should be packed full of Easter eggs and other gameplay mechanics. I feel like the tomb is just lacking in this department, which I'll go in more depth when I get to the Easter egg category, but for most of the areas they just feel unused or just kind of bland until you get into the Dark Ether. And by bland, I'm not referring to the actual look of the area or the atmosphere. This was a major complaint that we used to fault Cold War and Vanguard and Modern Warfare Zombies on, was the lack of personality for a map. And that's something I think they've actually done pretty well in Black Ops 6, considering that it has to be in the modern era of zombies. I think the devs have done a really good job at making me actually like the map's look. So I don't mean the actual atmosphere of the map, I just mean it feels unused. Like for example, the waterfall area. It looks great, but it offers really nothing for the players to enjoy after they see the area for the first time. But after a few games, the charm wears off and then there's nothing to really do in the waterfall area, so ultimately I end up just running by it just to get quick and I don't even think about it. That to me, that's a whole area that's just not used for anything really. It's no mystery that the focus was clearly on the Dark Ether in this map, but I don't feel like the rest of the map makes me want to explore its zones and use the layout. It doesn't really let me survive anywhere except for spawn or the middle, and this inevitably makes a smaller map feel even smaller with a lot of wasted areas. There is one thing that Treyarch absolutely nailed with this map, and that's the out-of-bounds areas, which I know might sound crazy, but in the same way that interior design uses mirrors to make rooms feel a little bit bigger, Treyarch did a really good job at using the out-of-bounds areas to make it feel like a bigger area. For example, when you're in the caverns, there's these vast, ever-expanding caves that go out, and it makes you feel like you're in a bigger zone. Or the ever-expanding infinite sky of the Dark Ether makes it feel like a bigger area than it actually is. So I will compliment Treyarch on the design aspect of this map. Had that been accompanied by a jam-packed full map with a lot of different gameplay mechanics in all the different zones, I think this would have been an absolute top-tier smaller map. The layout of the map, or the actual shape of it, I think is pretty good. It's very reminiscent to Revelations with the 4 teleporters for me, so I have no issue getting from zone to zone in terms of layout, but the real issue is just, do I even want to go zone to zone? Because I feel like this map is a mid-level small map with some good features, but ultimately there's a lot of missed opportunities that don't give me the will to actually stay in those different areas. So it isn't enough for me to consider it a bad map, but it's not a great map either. But let's move on to the next category, my personal bread and butter, Easter eggs, to see if the tomb is going to redeem itself with its hidden puzzles. Alright, you talked me into it. Let's go into the Easter eggs. So we have main Easter eggs and we have side Easter eggs. I'm going to focus on the side ones first. Now, side Easter eggs used to follow two rules. They would either give you high tier loot or they would be something whimsical. Usually the MO for side Easter eggs is that they were hidden better than the main Easter egg and they took a bit of effort to complete. But in this modern era of zombies, Easter eggs are a lot more simple. And with that being the case, I don't think it would be in good faith if I was to review these Easter eggs as bad because I personally don't like these simple Easter eggs. So that might be my own opinion, but I don't think it's fair to judge that since the whole format of the modern era of zombies is to have simpler Easter eggs. So with that being the case though, I do want to say that the Tomb side Easter eggs are really underwhelming. Most of them just give us an ammo mod or intel, and very few actually reward the player with something useful. On top of that, most of them are painfully simple, even more so than previous maps. We also didn't get nearly as many side Easter eggs on this map as we have in previous ones, and even though it's a smaller map, I don't think it's an excuse to not have it packed full of Easter eggs. Another takeaway for the side Easter eggs on this map is that they lacked a lot of depth. I never felt like one Easter egg really broke me away from the gameplay and let me experience something fun or exciting. You know, these are Easter eggs like the Maya cutscene on Citadel, or the boat race on Terminus, or the bowling Easter egg on Liberty. There's not one side Easter egg on this map that really stops the game and goes, hey, just enjoy the next few minutes. So every single Easter egg on this map is just kind of underwhelming, lackluster, and just lacking a lot of depth. Most of the eggs are just shooting something once or twice and congrats, here's your ammo mod, or hey, look over here at the statue for a second, oh wait, you're done. It's very simple Easter eggs and I just felt like really bored with them. The only one that I thought actually was quality was the golden armor one, as it's a little bit challenging, but even that one doesn't really break me away from the gameplay. The only redeeming quality for me on the side Easter eggs is that they flow pretty well with the main Easter egg in terms of progressing your player's upgrades, but for me it's just a lackluster experience and I consider it a pretty big drawback for the map The Tomb. Okay, maybe the main Easter egg will be better? Well, to be honest, I actually really enjoyed the main Easter egg and what it offers as steps. The progression's fun and it's easy to complete as you survive through the map, the boss fight's fun, and it's overall just a solid Easter egg. However, the biggest drawback for me is the length of the main Easter egg. I feel like in solo you don't notice this as much, but when you get up to a team of 4, this is an extremely quick Easter egg. If you think about it, it's really just get the ice staff, upgrade it, do a trial, and oh wait, you're in the boss fight, congrats. So seeing as how you can use a gobblegum to get the staff and skip the entire first part of this Easter egg, this is a extremely fast Easter egg with the right gobblegums. Alright, hey, you know what, maybe I'm just being a stickler for the rules, but I don't think a gobblegum should help you skip a fourth of the Easter egg. I think they should be there to assist you and make the gameplay a little bit more exciting, but they shouldn't let you skip a whole portion of the steps. So anyways, what I do think though is that they nailed the steps. I think they are actually fun. The only downside is that the Easter egg's just too short, and it feels like the main quests are just getting shorter and shorter. And maybe I'm an outlier, but I miss the days when a main Easter egg was a time commitment, I had to put in effort, and ultimately it felt like I was going on a journey. The steps progressed and got crazier and crazier. They started to utilize all the areas of the map, and by the end of it I felt like I had earned that reward and I left the experience feeling satisfied. Whereas on Black Ops 6, the main Easter eggs to me feel like a movie that's missing its final act, or a book without its last few chapters. It's like right when the story gets good, it's just over, and I'm left with this incomplete feeling. Now, it's not to say that the steps I did are bad or that I didn't enjoy the main quest. It just feels like it was cut short, and I think that's my biggest criticism for the main quest. I think Treyarch does a good job at making up the steps. It's just I'm left with this incomplete feeling. It's almost like if Dreisendrach was to build the bows and upgrade them, but as soon as you're done with that, it's time for the boss. And you're like, well, hang on, what about Dempsey, and what about the Ghost Pyramid and all that? What about that? And they're like, no, straight to the boss. And you're like, well, okay, I guess it's not a bad Easter egg, it just feels incomplete. And that's how I feel with Black Ops 6. And to finish out my point on the incomplete nature of these Easter eggs, it's not just the missing chapter at the end, but it's also the lack of visual evidence that I even made a difference on the map. For example, whenever you do Blood of the Dead, by the time you're done, you have lasers flying everywhere and lighthouses blown up and portals opening up, and it's very clear that you did something on the map. And what happens is you tell a story via those steps, and so subconsciously when you run around the map, you really feel like you made a difference, and it makes that journey feel worth it. Whereas on this map, it's like once you're done with a step, it just kind of goes back to normal, and the only step they actually did well in this regard is the final step when you light up the 4 pillars and you open up the bridge. That's the only time I felt like what I did mattered and changed the map. Whereas like most of the steps on this map and others, it feels like I just do a chore and then it goes back to normal and I keep going. I don't feel like I'm altering anything. So all in all, I think my takeaway is that the side Easter eggs let me down pretty bad on this map, but the main Easter egg I thought was the right amount of pacing, the right amount of difficulty, and ultimately I just enjoyed it for what it was, and I did have fun doing it. That being said, I do wish the Treyarch would take it to the next level visually, and also maybe extend the Easter egg, but I thought it was a good Easter egg for what it was. But alright, it's time to move on to our next category, which goes hand in hand with the Easter egg, which is of course the boss fight. And fair warning, this section will include spoilers for the boss fight, so if you don't want to ruin that for yourself, you can skip ahead to the next section. I've got chapters and timestamps on this video. But with that out of the way, let's get into the boss fight. Alright, so I guess after we've turned on the power switch one too many times, it's finally turned on us. That's right, what started as our power switch in Black Ops 4 has now become our mortal foe in Black Ops 6. We are fighting the Sentinel artifact. Well, specifically, it's the Odin artifact that's on Voyage of Despair, but since I can talk to girls, I'm just going to call it the Sentinel artifact and not get hung up on the details. This boss shoots lasers and has the ability to summon minions that can one-tap you into oblivion. It came out the gate at a higher difficulty level, causing a lot of players to rage over the lack of damage they were able to do to it. The layout of the arena was a simple circular pattern with 2 floors, allowing players to implement the old-fashioned counterclockwise method. This boss was not going down easy for players, as it turns out it doesn't take explosive damage. So not only do we not get a GS-45 wall buy, but we also can't use our favorite meta guns in the boss fight. Also, this boss is immune to the ice staff, which, look, I love a good troll as much as the next guy, but I don't know if Treyarch's just being funny or if they just forgot, but I find it hilarious that the entire Easter egg is to craft the ice staff only for us to not use it. So I don't know what to say about that, but I think it's kind of funny low-key. But anyways, a lot of people were struggling with this boss fight. Of course, not the ones who use the hand cannon glitch to render the boss useless, but for most people, this was a difficult fight. So, is the boss fight good, is it bad, or forgettable? Well, I personally enjoyed the difficulty of this fight. However, as for the visuals and the boss attacks and the phases, I found that this fight was very boring and lacking a lot of variation. If the difficulty was reduced, then I really don't get the appeal of this fight. I enjoyed the struggle of fighting the sheer amount of minions that spawn in while I'm trying to dodge the boss's lasers, but as for a boss fight, it sure doesn't feel like I'm actually facing off against the boss. It's very reminiscent of the Voyage of Despair Easter egg, where I'm fighting mostly minions, then I have to dodge the occasional laser from the giant eyeball here and there. And whenever this happens, it doesn't really feel like an epic boss fight. And this is coming from someone who loves Voyage of Despair. It's one of my favorite maps, but the boss fight itself kind of let me down, and I get the same vibe on this map. In the way that Terminus did it, I like a balance of attacks and minions. I think what would have made this fight better is if the lasers actually targeted you instead of just going in a predictable pattern. Maybe the boss could have done its AoE attack that it does at the end periodically throughout the fight. But the only time I really thought about the boss is when I had to shoot it in the first phase, but after that, I almost forgot I was fighting it. So inevitably, I end up just fighting the same enemies I've been fighting, just with a lot more of them. So for the difficulty, I give it an 8 out of 10, but for the visuals and excitement of the boss, I think a 3 out of 10. Another feature that I think would have helped this fight tremendously is if the atmosphere changed as the phases progressed. There was no real indicator on which phase you were on outside of the health bar and just more lasers, but I think that would have added a lot more excitement to the actual fight. And Treyarch, if you happen to see this video, please do not nerf the fight like you did in the Outbreak Easter egg. That really killed that boss fight, and I would hate to see that happen in this one, as the difficulty is its main appeal. The last thing I'll say about the boss is that it feels like a missed opportunity that you can't survive in the arena after the main Easter egg is complete. You can survive as long as you want in the arena before activating the artifact, but not after. I mean, what, did our bridge to Terabithia suddenly crumble, or did they just not want us teabagging our slain enemy? I don't really know, but it just feels like it makes a smaller map even smaller, and that could have just been a new area that we unlocked almost as a reward for beating the Easter egg. So overall, it just didn't feel like a climatic ending to this map. It was a fun fight because it was difficult, but I didn't really feel like I was in a boss fight. But now that I've discussed the boss, let's move on to our next category, which is the gameplay loop. I've mentioned a few of these talking points already, but in this category I want to further expand on these and also discuss a few technical aspects of this map. I'm going to be covering the gameplay loop and the tools used to create the experience of this map, like the wonder weapon and the various mechanics. In case you don't know what a gameplay loop is, it's a series of actions that players repeat throughout a game. It's a fundamental aspect of game design that determines how players experience the game and how motivated they are to keep playing. This would be like our Easter eggs and rewards, wonder weapon features, our players' upgrades, the loot found around the map, and the overall cycle of round progression, to name a few. This also refers to the way we move around the map, as well as the multiplayer aspect of our game. So in basic terms, it's everything the player does to experience the map. Alright, so with zombies we progress round by round in hopes of upgrading our player as we go in order to match the difficulty of the horde by using the features and the Easter eggs around the map. And in this aspect, I think the tomb does this pretty well, but it also kind of fails. Anyways, let me explain. What I think it does well is that the main Easter egg matches the progression of where the players need to be in order to complete that step. For example, by the time you're working on the ice staff, it's probably about round 10 or so, and the player would have the necessary upgrades to complete the lockdown for the wall puzzle. I think that they pace the main Easter egg steps with the round that the player would typically be on pretty well. However, I feel like they fail at this in the later rounds on this map. I'm specifically talking about round 30 onward. Outside of the golden armor, none of the side Easter eggs are useful in the later rounds. The loot is pointless the higher the rounds get, as the player would already have tons of salvage and the ability to buy whatever they want and whenever they want it. This isn't exactly unique to this map alone, but a good example of high round gameplay loops would be some sort of objective or side Easter egg that activates at a certain round to reward the player with something that's desirable at that point. For example, the golden armor Easter egg could have been repeatable, and maybe we get random buffs every 10 rounds when we do it. That way it gives the player something to work on and a reason to keep playing the game. So what I'm trying to say is that there's no incentive to survive high rounds and rewards for doing so. So for me, the gameplay loop stops being worth it after about round 40. With the exception of the ray gun and the golden armor Easter eggs, the rewards for the side Easter eggs, as mentioned earlier, are pointless, as the player can easily buy an ammo mod or a perk. The ground loot like the dig spots, crystals, and plants serves almost no purpose in the later rounds, and they're barely useful in the early rounds. So for me, the gameplay loop for the puzzles and rewards is just mid-level effective and doesn't encourage the players to progress rounds after the main Easter egg. This is especially crucial when the map is smaller, as it's easier for a player to get bored as is. Next in our cycle, I want to discuss the wonder weapon some more. I think they did a great job with its gameplay features, and it allows players to just have fun and enjoy freezing zombies in large hordes for the entire game. The revive feature is good as well, and I really just don't have any complaints for this weapon. It was honestly a highlight of my gameplay. So good job Treyarch for reviving a classic wonder weapon in zombies, and honestly this is something that Black Ops 6 has done really well so far. The jet gun is light years beyond the original version, and the ray gun isn't dog water either. And it really just seems like they thought about how the players would want their beloved weapons to return to this game, and they made them actually fun. The next aspect of the gameplay loop is the way that we move around the map. I mentioned this earlier on how easy it is to navigate the map, and I really enjoy how simple it is to go from one side to the other. This is crucial for reviving your shit teammates when they go down with the ray gun, and I think they achieved that pretty well. However, I do feel like the variety of how you navigate could have been at a higher level. This might seem like I'm getting a bit nitpicky, but I'm simply comparing it to the previous maps, even in Black Ops 6, so just bear with me, I'll try to explain this. For example, they could have had the waterfall area have a part where you slide down the water to get around that map a little bit easier, or maybe when you go in the dark ether, it has bounce pads similar to the biodome and moon. This is a very common thing in zombies, so I was actually kind of surprised that we didn't get that for this map. You know, we've had the moon pads, to the mine carts on Shangri-La, to the rope climbing course on Rave, to the fling pads on Call of the Dead, all the way to dragons and giant robots. And before you feel like I'm blinded by nostalgia, this is actually a feature on Black Ops 6 as well in all the other maps. You know, we had the elevators and boats in Terminus, the zip lines on Liberty, the cannon on Citadel. But what about the teleporters on Tomb? Why don't those count? Well, you see, my young grasshopper, the Tomb teleporters are more a technical thing to just get to the next area of the map. They're not exactly there for an enjoyment. Think about it like this. We had Citadel with the teleporter in Spawn that went from Spawn to the Sword Room. That was just your fast travel. That's the equivalent of the Tomb teleporters. But you see, they also added a cannon, because who doesn't want to get shot out of a cannon? What I'm trying to say is there's usually features that allow you to traverse an area or just enjoy that area that make it a little bit more exciting when you're going around the map. And I don't say this just to bash the map for no reason. I'm saying without any sort of variety in the outside survivable areas, it doesn't really have anything that's memorable. And all of that ties back into what I was saying earlier about how each area feels bland and lacking Easter eggs and cool features. And now lastly, we have the multiplayer aspect of the map. This map doesn't really let a full team have a whole lot to do outside of just surviving. As I mentioned earlier, the main quest takes about 2 minutes with a full team, and the side Easter eggs are nearly pointless. Outside of that, the areas to survive in aren't really set up for players to stick to different zones as much as it should be, so the upside of the multiplayer is that it's easy to get to your teammates if needed, and the downside is it feels crowded and lacking any sort of rewards or balance to the amount of players that's in it. So all in all, I found the gameplay loop to just be kind of mid. It's not bad, but it's not good either. I really feel like it just gives the bare minimum for players to really want to stay in the game and keep going. After your team completes the main Easter egg, it just doesn't have much to offer, and it lacks variety of features to enjoy while surviving in the map itself. Alright, now that I've covered the gameplay loop, let's talk about something a bit more exciting, shall we? Let's go on to the storyline. Alright, so obviously there's massive spoilers for the storyline, so if you don't want that ruined for you, you know what to do, skip ahead to that next section. Alright, now that we've weeded out all the employed people that haven't done the Easter egg, let's talk storyline. The Black Ops 6 story isn't as convoluted as previous storylines, so it really needed to be good in order to hold our attention. In the previous modern era of zombies, this was really dull due to us not having a set crew in order to grow attached to, and as a result care about the story. So in Black Ops 6 we do have a set crew, and the story is a bit juicier than previous titles in the modern era. Well, I guess in a way it's all the stories at this point, because we have the Ether, the Chaos, the Dark Ether, and even Vanguard unfolding in Black Ops 6. I mean, I almost expect Dr. Straub to come out of a portal holding hands with Willard Wyler next. And honestly, I am more interested in this year's storyline despite it being a bit predictable. But to be fair, I did grow up with Milo and his whiteboard while I tried to make sense of it all in the middle school bus, so I don't know, maybe I'm just not used to a storyline that I can follow pretty easily. So how does the tomb rank with its new addition to the story in Black Ops 6? Immediately I'm going to have to take off points for the fact that we didn't get an intro cutscene. We did get an outro, but it is unfortunate why this is happening, and I would be a little bit remiss if I didn't talk about it a little bit. So we have been having the AI voice actor strike that's been going on at Treyarch. This has massively affected the game's characters and story, as they've removed the actors from voicing their characters, or they're just being replaced entirely. Rip Samantha. I mean, Sam was already lost in the Dark Ether. Did we have to banish her again? Julia Nathanson, the lady that voices Samantha, is an awesome voice actor and a very nice person who has offered her voice for the franchise for a long time now. So to see her replaced does put a sour taste in everybody's mouth going forward. I mention all this because it clearly affected the tomb, since we didn't get an intro cutscene and our outro cutscene doesn't have any dialogue from our characters. So storyline wise, this does hurt the immersion of the story quality when no one actually speaks. The outro cutscene, besides the lack of dialogue, did feature AI Samantha at the end, who does all the heavy lifting for the installment of the story. I feel like the cutscene fails massively to be exciting, and it just doesn't really feature our characters very much, but what it does do well is it dumps a ton of awesome lore. We learned about the Sentinel artifacts and how they came to be. We also learned that we're going to be returning to the Liberty Falls Manor, so take that however you want, I guess, but we also got to see what the manor is and why it was built, and as well as seeing some backstory to Richtofen and the artifact sacrifice. We also know that AI Samantha can't be trusted, and she's going to be luring us to return to the manor to carry out her wicked plan, while our characters have no idea that it won't be as easy to save the real Samantha as they originally thought. In terms of gameplay, the storyline didn't really hold my attention on this map as much as previous ones when we had like Professor Modi and Dr. Panos and just people overall to interact with. This map didn't really have that, and so I felt like it was lacking in that department as well. And to tie that feeling back into what I was saying earlier about the main Easter egg not having any visual evidence of completing it really, this map feels like I do some steps, nothing really changes, and the storyline isn't affected at all by what I did in the map, and then all of a sudden I get a reward and a silent film followed by a massive trauma dump from AI Sam. The storyline for the tomb is lukewarm for me personally, but as a whole Black Ops 6 is interesting, and I'm enjoying the storyline enough to want to keep playing the maps to find out more. And with that, I am done with the story and my breakdown for this map's features, so now ladies and gentlemen, let's move into the last section of this review, the overall rating of this map, and my final summary. The Tomb is a small, quaint little map with cool scenery that just fell short of its former maps in the series when it came to the Easter eggs and the charm of the gameplay loop. This is better as a bonus map than a full-fledged DLC main map, but to be fair, the jury is still out on whether this will go down as our official DLC 2, or will it turn out to be a side map to Citadel by the end of our gameplay cycle. Only time will tell. But I've looked at what this map offers, what it does well, where it falls short, and I tried to break down all those features for you guys to the best of my abilities. So what do I rate this new map, and why? Well, looking at the map's features, storylines, Easter eggs, and overall replayability, I give the map the following. For the gameplay loop, I give it a 5 out of 10. It's not bad, but it's also not going to reward you in the high rounds, and I feel like that does hurt it, so I think it's just kind of a mid-tier or moderate level gameplay loop. For Easter eggs, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with a 2 out of 10. This is what hurt my gameplay experience the most. I mean, I'm an Easter egg guy, that's how you win me over, but unfortunately, all the side Easter eggs were just kind of boring, very, very simple. They didn't really reward you with anything, and I felt like there was nothing that really stood out to me with the Easter egg. The main Easter egg is fun a few different times, but again, it's really simple if you're playing in a team. Solo, it's fun, but after a few times, I don't see someone wanting to grind this over and over. So with all that factored in, I'm going to have to go with a pretty low rating for the Easter eggs. For the storyline, I'm going to go with a 4 out of 10. If it wasn't for the ending cutscene lore that we got, I would have probably gone with a much lower rating because, for one, we don't have an intro cutscene. 2, the ending cutscene's lacking dialogue. 3, you can't replace Julia Nathanson. And 4, while I was playing the map, I just didn't feel very immersed. There's no characters we interact with. The boss is a piece of metal that I shot a bunch. I just didn't feel very connected with the storyline on this map. So with all that together, I'm going to give it a generous score of 4 out of 10. And lastly, for replayability, I'm gonna go with a healthy 5 out of 10. I don't think that this map is bad, I just think it doesn't make me want to return to it over and over. I could see where the appeal of grinding camos on this map would be nice. It's a cool map to look at, so I like it for that reason, but it doesn't make me want to dive back into the story every time I play the map. And so for that reason, I think the replayability is just a 5 out of 10. And so my overall final rating for the tomb is a 4 out of 10. The reason being, after analyzing all the different aspects that this map had to offer, it's something that entertains you those first few times, but it doesn't hold my attention like previous maps do. One redeeming quality though for this map is I feel like for casual players, it gives them a chance to practice how to do a main Easter egg solo and get better at the game, so I think it's good for that because it has a good atmosphere and it doesn't take too long to do the Easter egg, and I just think it's a good map for practice in that sense. But as a veteran player, I really don't see this as a legacy map or an Easter egg that's memorable. And now I'll offer some words of wisdom before I sign off. I hope that I've explained my thoughts in a way that could be understood even if you oppose my views, but at the end of the day, I encourage you to try the map for yourself and form your own opinions, and if you enjoy it, then play it, and that's all that matters. I think the community right now is very quick to either praise new content without giving any critical thought, and we're also very quick to criticize new content just because it gets views or it's fun to do, or people just like to be toxic. I feel like this toxicity towards people that don't agree with you is a very misplaced anger, and we need to learn how to adjust our expectations and deliver critiques and compliments correctly when needed in the game. Because it's important to voice our concerns, critiques, and praise, but in a formulated way that offers constructive feedback. And with that, I'm gonna wrap up this ultimate breakdown of the tomb. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, as it's one of my first ever review type videos I've ever done for a map, so let me know your thoughts on this video, and I'd love to hear your takes on this map and what you guys rate it. I've got more videos planned, of course, and I really appreciate everybody in this community. We've almost hit 15,000 people, and I honestly never expected that, so thank you so much for that. If you guys want to join my Discord or follow me on X, I've got it all linked below, and thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Absoulem, and I hope to see you in my next video.